Right. Okay. Right. Okay, let's go ahead and begin our Wednesday, October 18th, Truckee Meadows Water. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Western Regional Water. This is Tumwater. It's fine. But this is where. Oh, okay, I'm all. Why is this there? Western Regional Water Commission. I know we have a few online with a few different things going on. Ms. Dewar has joined us, but she's not feeling the best, and so I'm going to go ahead and lead the meeting with Paul Anderson not being in town today as well. So
thank you, Chris.
yeah, no problem at all. If we can go ahead and have roll call.
Clara Andriola,
Present.
Christopher Dare,
Here.
Susan Sever,
Here.
Paul Anderson, Naomi Durr,
Here,
Maria Luz Garcia,
Here.
Jenny Breathes,
I'm here.
Alexis Hill,
here,
Donald Abbott.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. If you don't mind standing, we can pledge allegiance. Ms. Jenny Breakfast, you mind leading us today?
Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. How's that? That's fine. We might bring up the stuff to come with public comment. You have this? Yeah.
You can join the meeting via telephone only by dialing 1-719-359-4580, entering the meeting ID and pressing number. Please mute and unmute phones by dialing *6. The public may sign up to speak during the public comment period or on a specific agenda item in person by completing a public comment information, request to speak card, and submitting it to the clerk, or virtually by raising the virtual hand icon in the Zoom platform, or if attending by phone, dialing *9 to notify the clerk. Note, dialing *9 on the phone will both raise a virtual hand and lower it.
Very much. Do we have any public comment? Anybody online? Let's go ahead and continue forward. We have our approval of the agenda. I'm looking for a motion. So we have our first, and is it you first? Okay, I just want to make sure she heard. So we have a first, and I have a second?
I'll second it.
Susan second. Okay, thank you so much. All in favor?
aye,
Passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes from the August 16, 2023 Western Regional Water Commission. And do we have any questions, amendments, or a motion to pass?
motion to approve. Dewar,
First, second? Second, Ms. Gomez.
Oh, you know what? I did have a question.
Sorry.
Did have a question on the, wasn't there a reference in the minutes, and I probably should have brought it up on the, agenda approval. But I think there was reference in the minutes about, an item that was gonna come on today's agenda that I didn't see. And that was the Cold Springs balance study, maybe?
That's correct. And we ended up pulling that agenda item because Director Smith of Washington County, who was going to present that last couple of years, wasn't able to make the meeting in October. So we're going to bring that forward November 1st.
Okay, and it's the results of the study.
Yeah, well, yeah, he'll present on the Cold Springs the water reclamation rapid infiltration balance, or rapid infiltration basin analysis, sorry.
Okay,
And then he'll present on the Cold Springs regional water balance for that sewership.
okay, and he just wasn't available today, but it's been produced, right? It's an available document.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So with that, we had a first and a second on approval of the minutes. All in favor?
aye,
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Discussion and possible approval of the fiscal year 2023 WRWC financial statements and audit opinion and possible direction to staff. Kim Rigdon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the commission. I'll just go ahead and introduce Zeth Macy, who is our auditor with Macy's. Zeth Macy and not Zeth Macy. I cannot talk this morning. I apologize. I'm still going to wake up and get my coffee. Shepard Macy and Associates are WRWC auditing firm, and Zeth Macy is here to present our.
Morning, everyone.
Welcome.
I've had a chance to look through the audit report. I'd like to just thank Kim and Susan for their help with the audit. Everything went really smoothly this year, very efficiently, which is always a auditor's dream. So let's go ahead and if we turn to page 1, the auditor's report here. It's a couple pages in. And the second paragraph here, this is our audit opinion. The financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the general fund of the Western Regional Water Commission as of June 30th. With respect to changes in the financial position and budgetary comparison for the general fund for the year then ended in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. This is essentially an unmodified, or what's known as a cleanup.
Just want to interrupt. Can you guys hear okay online? I think
It's a little quiet, so
Yeah,
I'm having a little hard
protection
time
would be
hearing
helpful.
myself. So I want to, I want to make sure my hearing aids were working just fine. So can you just speak up just a little bit? We just have this one microphone. Thank you.
So if we turn to page 4, this is what's called the management's discussion and analysis. And we kind of just go to the bottom here. There's some financial highlights that I was going to go over. The Commission's government-wide net position increased by $203,000 to $2.28 million. And the Commission's general fund reported an increase in general fund of $212,000 to $2.3 million. Flipping to the next page, governmental activities general revenues increased by nearly $91,000 or 5.5% from the prior year, and expenses increased by $185,000 or 14% from the prior year. Turn to page 7 at the bottom. This is some of the significant matters. To overall revenues and expenses compared to the previous fiscal year are normal fluctuations. Expenses increased due to personnel costs for a staff position that was filled on June 1st, 2022. Water surcharge revenue is lower, however, the investment income increased. Of management. Revenue is sufficient and will continue to be stable since member purveyors regularly monitor water rates to ensure an acceptable level of cash flow for operations. As a result, a consistent and stable source of revenue should continue to provide sufficient financial resources for the Commission to achieve its desired goals and objectives. Now, if we kind of turn almost to the very back, on page 24. This is our second report, the independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. The bottom paragraph here, during our audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that considered to be material weaknesses. The results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. Flip to the last page, statute compliance. The Commission complied with all significant statutory constraints on its financial administration during the year. And under audit recommendations, we did not have any financial weaknesses of a magnitude to justify inclusion within our report. I open up for any questions.
Are there any questions or concerns? Ms. Briggs?
Thank you. and it might be for Ms. Ripken, I'm really trying to zero in and just not getting a lot of understanding over at Reno, so I'm looking at other budgets. You know, you missed your budget projections for the revenue, which is water sales. And trying to figure out why that was. Was it because, in your view, we had such a massive year, so it really equates more to the funding source where there wasn't a lot of water demand? Or is it possibly related to the economic development cycle, which we are in now, a change from when you prepared the budget? What do you think?
That's a great question, and I wish I could answer that question.
Okay. That's
I
okay.
could get with Tom on
That's
it.
okay.
That would be a good.
Well, my next question, and that's, you know, I'm trying to understand economic cycles and where we're at. And like I said, you know, this is a real simple revenue input. But you know, other factors can show a better picture of what's going on out there. But but specific to this organization, how do you go about preparing your budget? Because you're hosted by Washoe County, but you're dependent upon Tumwa, you know, the lake to Tumwa. So how do you go about preparing that budget projection?
Okay, that's a great question. So I work with the financial manager, Susan Dees, who's in our audience, and we can ask her.
From Washoe County?
From Washoe County, yes.
So Washoe County's budget office, okay.
Yes, and so I work primarily with them, and we look at what cash funds are remaining in the balance, or what our projected cash funds are remaining in the balance. We look at what's been spent in the past on the professional services.
Yeah. I'm more looking at the revenues coming in.
Yeah, the
That's what I'm
revenues
saying.
coming in it's just a quarterly estimation based on previous years. And so we do the best that we can to project what we think is going to come in based on what we've received in previous years. And sometimes
Okay.
that can go over or under, so.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been on, you know, I think for a while on this board, and maybe I haven't had the time to, you know, catch it before, but that was how much did you miss the budget projections by? It's not that much. It was only on the water surcharge fees. It was only, well, let's see.
On page 15,
15,000?
no, 15, on page 15.
Oh, it's on, yeah, I was looking on page 10. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you how much, was it 30,000? Original?
Yeah.
Yeah.
30,000. So that's a less than 10%.
So in speaking to that, and I say that obviously I encourage you if there's more information to have. I think that we've seen, I think one of the things that, and I'm not an expert, you probably would know more about this than I do, but the thing I have seen and learned is our weather we don't predict, and the weather controls much of what happens here. And so when we make all kind of projections, even at Tumwa, we find ourselves at losses that we, you know, because these guys are affected by Tumwa, which Tumwa's rates. And again, I'm speaking out of as much as I understand, but I'm pretty positive that would be the main factor. I don't question that anything happening in our communities at large would have sound, but water is one of those things that it doesn't matter if we're going through difficult times as with interest rates or not, people have to buy water when they need water. And so I think it really comes down to probably the other. But again, I think in the future, if you want to do that, we're going to keep rolling. But is there any other questions regarding this from online or here? Mrs. Gardner, see? Do you have any questions?
No.
I just said you brought it earlier. I was making sure I got it right.
Corrected it.
Okay, very good. So with that said, we are looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Do I have first? I have a second?
Second.
I have, I think Andrea beat you, I think. So we'll got a second there. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And my only encouragement is I would say that I think when we are looking forward, it's good for us to understand that. So if we have questions, maybe in the future.
Yeah, those are great questions. I can work closer with some of the weather coordinators and find out
I'd like to know,
fluctuations.
see if I'm close to my idea. So, okay. We're going to go ahead and continue on 7. This is related item, discussion of possible designation of Shetler Macy Associates LLC as the external auditors for the fiscal year 2024 WRWC financial statement audit. And if approved, authorize the chair to execute the related engagement letter and direct staff to file the required documents with the state of Nevada. Ms. Regan.
Thank you, Member Bear. Members of the committee, you'll see in your board packet the engagement letter for Shetler Macy Associates. And every October after we give the financials, we enter into another engagement with them for the next fiscal year. Primarily, we continue to use Shetler Macy Associates because they're also Washoe County's auditor, and it creates an alignment with an ease in doing the audit, the same auditor for both. And so to align with that process, we're recommending that the commission enter into the engagement letter with Shetler Macy Associates and direct staff to submit the letter of engagement to the state.
Are there any questions or concerns or motion?
I'm going to continue with the Shetler Macy as outlined in the staff report.
Have a first?
I'll second.
Have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
That's unanimous. You still have a job?
Yeah.
Congratulations. Good
Thank you
job.
very
Thank you
much.
very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good job on this. Okay, we're moving on to H, presentation of the Truckee Meadow Stormwater Quality Management Program and action discussion of possible approval of the Truckee Meadow Stormwater Permit Coordinating Committee's watershed assessment scope of work and budget not to exceed $65,000 for fiscal year 2024. We have wait for it. Did I say that right?
Yes, almost.
Oh, why not?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Birgit Whitgren, Water Management Planner, and I would like to introduce Ms. Teresa Jones, who is a senior civil engineer with the City of Reno, and she's also the coordinator for the Truckee Meadows Stormwater Permit Coordinating Committee. And she's going to give us an update on that committee's progress with their stormwater program, as well as a proposal for watershed assessments.
My allergies are terrible right now. I think so many people are suffering. There was a keyboard. Are you going to advance the slides?
You have the clicker right in front of you.
Maybe should we just read the table and I'll just do a little bit with the presenters, because I'm seeing a couple people sticking their ears up to the screen.
Advance. Okay. And members of the committee, my name is Teresa Jones, coordinator for the Stormwater Committee at WPCC. The Stormwater Committee is tasked with developing, administering, and ensuring implementation of the Truckee Meadows Stormwater Management Program, what we also call the SWAMP. And that is the document that outlines over 125 best management practices divided up amongst 7 program elements that are outlined in the MS4 permit that each agency, Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, must implement on an annual basis in order to be in compliance with the MS4 permit. And with the responsibilities of the Stormwater Committee to ensure that the SWAMP is implemented, we have a budget of $262,500, which is funded by the WRWC. So periodically when we're asked, we provide you all with an update of our activities since the last time we were before this body. And that's what I plan to do today. Use some highlights of what we've done since the last time we presented, as well as provide backup information for our request of $65,000 for the watershed assessments. So the bullet items that you see here, except for the top bullet item, is a line item in that stormwater management program, a line item in the SWAMP that the committee itself is responsible for implementing. The committee's has published a lot of documents since its inception over the past 20 years, and a lot of trainings, and we didn't have a logo. So that was something that we did this year to show the hard work that the committee does behind the scenes to ensure implementation of the swamp. We're tasked with providing public outreach and education for agency staff, as well as contractor employees for maintenance and operations, construction sites, SWIPs, inspections. A new training that we did this past year that was very well received was training HOA managers on best management practices and how to maintain their stormwater infrastructure. We've updated tmstormwater.com. That is the committee's website. That is a BMP that we must do. A good outcome from the COVID pandemic is those trainings that we conducted over the past couple of years had to be done online when we were in lockdown. So we had recordings of those, and those training videos are a new addition to tmstormwater.com. We're in the process of creating a watershed tool for the public that highlights the tributaries within the Truckee Meadows that discharge to the Truckee River. It provides unique information about each watershed, provides trailhead information, hiking information for Hunter Creek, Whites Creek, Thomas Creek, and whatnot. And one of the most important things that the Stormwater Committee does is the stormwater quality monitoring, and that includes the tributary watershed assessments. Just to back up, that's the bottom bullet. The Watershed Management Protection Plan for tributaries to the Truckee River, that was an effort done a couple of years ago, funded by WRWC, in order for the agencies to have access to the larger pool of 319 funds that are available to Nevada each year. And the tributary watershed assessments are a key element to that. And also a line item in the Truckee Meadows in the swamp. So for the last watershed assessment that the committee did was in 2022. We had 6 tributaries. We were able to cover that under the Stormwater Committee budget. This year, we have 5 reaches, 5 streams, 5 tributaries, and 9 reaches. The $65,000 ask of this commission was for the first 4 creeks up there. It was brought to our attention that Whites Creek was, the middle and lower reaches needed to be assessed as well. And so we added that to the scope of work. That increased the scope of work to $78,500, I believe. And NDOT has agreed to pick up that additional cost if this $65,000 request is granted to the committee.
Can I ask a quick question first, correction or whatever? You said 2022 is when you did your last one, said 2020 up there.
Pardon me,
Your last slide said 2020. You said you did in 2022.
Oh,
I just wanted
yes.
a clarification for everybody.
Certainly. So the photograph, I don't know if there is a pointer on this. The 2020 date up there, that is when the Watershed Management and Protection Plan for tributaries to the Truckee River was published and sent to EPA for approval. That is the Watershed Management Plan update to the 2007 plan. That is the plan that gives us access to the larger pot of 319 funds that are available to NDEP.
Gotcha, but in 2022, we did do a study, as you mentioned, so we are aware of how well our watershed's doing.
For those reaches that we...
For those reaches that you did in
Yes.
2022.
In 2022,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let me back up and explain just a little bit further. There are 26 tributaries to the Truckee River in the Truckee Meadows. We don't assess all of those. but we assess the major ones. Each stream has 3 tributaries each. Ideally, we're assessing each stream reach every 4th year. That's how it was set up in 2005. But for various reasons, primarily funding constraints, we haven't been able to do that. The Great Recession, there wasn't funds to do that. And then in my last slide here, I will show you the funding constraints that we have for this year. But depending on what activities the Stormwater Committee is doing, we haven't been able to do those assessments on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
So these are some of the deliverables of the watershed assessments. They provide a very valuable tool for Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County to provide within each agency's jurisdiction the overall health of these stream reaches, the proper functioning condition, and tracks impairments over time, how quickly these streams are degrading. So it allows the agencies to prioritize stream restoration projects. And these are an example of Steamboat Creek, what these assessments look like in the report documents. And I have to say, trying to, for the city of Reno, get funding for stream restoration, it's very difficult to get that funding because of just the overwhelming needs of these agencies and the limited dollars that we have. So just to give you a very brief breakdown of our annual budget, the column in the table. Anyway, oh yeah, thank you, yeah. So this is our overall 262.5 budget. This column on the left is the line items within that budget that we submit to WRWC each year. You can see that this 204,585 is the largest portion of our pie. That's the stormwater quality monitoring budget. It's broken down by our agreement with Balance Hydrologics. Oh, some of the tables cut off. Darn. Oh well. That this year is $215,000. We also have our agreement with USGS for a stream maintenance of a stream gauge, miscellaneous stormwater quality management items. That includes the update to tmstormwater.com, the watershed tool, various help we need for updating trainings and whatnot. Our interlocal coordination and permitting support, that's staff report to run the business of the Stormwater Committee, public outreach and technical guidance, that adds up to 262.5. And that helps on certain items. For instance, the stormwater quality monitoring, Balance Hydrologics has been our consultant. They monitor at least 3 storms a year, monitoring the storm drain systems and the tributaries during storm events. And I wish this last column showed up, but it really showed that we were able to leverage, oh, there you go, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Almost $327,000 a year we're able to fund. So that collaboration with NDOT, that partnership with NDOT is really important to us. So this final slide it attempts to show, and I hope I do a better job than the last time I presented this slide. Our annual budget is 262.5, and the column, the green column on the left, is the water quality monitoring agreement that we have with Balance Hydrologics. And you can see over the years that those costs have increased. Stormwater monitoring is very labor intensive. With wages going up, fuel costs going up, lab fees going up, we just don't have the budget. In 2019, the monitoring budget with balance was just under $150,000. Invoicing WRWC for 75%, and not picking up the remainder 25%. That left us almost $151,000 to do the remainder of the business of the Stormwater Committee, including the watershed assessments. In this fiscal year, the total agreement with with balance was $215,000. That leaves us only $101,000 to run the remainder of the business, the staffing fees, the agreements, other miscellaneous items that we have to do each year. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention. I respectfully ask that you consider funding this important work that protects the water quality of the Kentucky River. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yes, can you put their faces back in so I can see? Any questions? I have a few, but I'm gonna go last. So if anybody has questions, concerns, thoughts, online or present? Well, then I'll start with my questions. I don't see anybody. One is, if we had more money, because you're not asking that much money, I mean, but what more would we do? And I say monitoring, I only say this, I don't know that I've seen a monitoring, any results of monitoring. I've only seen the asks. I've never seen a result for monitoring of how we're doing, how much is going through, what are we finding, what are we not finding, and are we cleaning them? When you say maintenance, are we actually maintaining and cleaning? Because I know, well, I get complaints many times about some of our ditches and watersheds that
So do I.
are there. So is that something that, I don't know, it might be good for us to understand that better as you ask for. I get your need. This is pretty evident. This is not that hard for me to understand. But when we talk about watershed and we talk about what's happening, it's a larger picture than just this. But we really haven't, I don't know that I've ever really received information regarding what you're finding.
Right, and that's an excellent point, and a point that I meant to bring up in my presentation is the water quality monitoring that Balance Hydrologics has been doing for the committee is the metric that NDP uses to assess how well the three agencies are implementing the stormwater management program and whether or not, adjustments need to be made. And so we submit that water quality report to NDEP each year. It's very dense. It's typically 300 plus pages. There's a sampling analysis plan. There's a lot of protocol that needs to be followed to provide that water quality information to NDEP. And they review that, and we also have to submit an annual report to them, and we self-assess on those 125 BMPs that we need to implement, and then they provide us feedback on whether or not we're doing well. So the other point I want to make is stormwater monitoring stormwater, particularly in an area like the Truckee Meadows, is notoriously difficult to get a trend out of. We did do a trend with 5 years worth of data. We are going to do another trends analysis in either, I think next year we'll be doing another trends analysis looking at the 10 years of data that we did collect data from the 80s as well. And it showed, the results were mixed. It did show some improvements in some of the tributaries. It showed status quo in some of the storm drain systems. It showed a decline in North Truckee Drain, which Sparks is investigating further. It showed a decline in City of Reno's Arlington Outfall.
So kind of my point, and I say that it doesn't have to be all today because we have things. That would be as important, if not more important to me, of what I want to see where the money's go. We're responsible for that, but we would love to see information actually on our storm drains. Like, not a snapshot, I don't want 300,000 pages. We're not trying to reduplicate. I just think it would be helpful to all of us in our region of knowing what's going on, what you're finding, and then it would also give credence when you ask for more money. It's a lot easier for us to say, oh, that's what you do. Thank you, we need that information.
Right. Well, I'll work with.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to support you in that. I 100% agree. I think it would be great to get more of an executive summary that's tuned towards the board or the general public. And especially it would be great to have a map. And you may have all of the basis for this, just haven't put it together in this kind of package, for this audience versus the regulators. What do you think, Teresa?
Yeah, I'll work with Kim and Birgit to put that together for the commission.
Thank you. I think
It's a great idea.
I think it helps us understand.
Yeah, and my colleagues read my mind. I was flipping through the 351 page annual report right now, trying to get a handle on some of the high level touching points. I really appreciate that suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely.
The real story in stormwater is Reno's inability to stand up a stormwater utility with a dedicated funding source. And so they end up tapping it out of the sewer fund, which is very inequitable because not all pay into the sewer fund. And the concept of a stormwater utility is, bigger polluters, people with bigger properties, impervious area, they pay more. And so right now with Reno's, creating a shortfall to manage this important, need in our community, and then the inequities of how we do pay where stormwater is really where the focus needs to be. And just to let folks know, Reno went out for a business impact study on a methodology for standing up that utility, and he didn't even see the light of day coming to the council for a vote. The manager pulled it off, and we're supposedly going through another one. But it's been 5 years in the making. Reno has just not put it forward, and that's really the source of why this function is floundering. You all put it on your sewer line, and we have an automatic escalator in our sewer line, but we don't have dedicated money for stormwater that is equitable and fair, and that's really the priority.
Well, hopefully, and I say that, and I'm careful to I don't barrage our other entities, but I do want to say very clearly that I think information like this helps us all hold each other accountable and things we see. So if you were to look into Sparks and we have a disparity that we're not taking care of something, it would help you guys to come say, what are you guys doing over there? So I say that's part of why I think this is really important as well. But thank you for sharing that. But so that'd be very helpful. But is there anything else online before we move on? We definitely need to vote on this, or
Mr. Chair,
yes, please. Oh, please.
Birgit Whittegren for the record. I did want to state for the record that the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission did recommend this for
Thank you.
funding.
Appreciate that. We appreciate that. Please tell them thank you. So with that said, I believe we're looking for a motion to support or not.
Motion to support the report that we just heard and accept it. And then are we looking for a budget commitment too?
Yeah, that included in that, I think, is
Yes.
the financial increase.
And approving the financial increase.
So we have first, second.
I'll second.
We do have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
No one's opposed. I do want to please send a shout out to Inda. Thank you for stepping up with us. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Thank you both. Appreciate it. Allergy season's almost over. You're going to make it. I know it's going to be good. Okay, we are on to the presentation on and I'm not even going to say that word. It's PFAS though. Kim Rigdon, and I know she hasn't guessed her with me.
Thank you. Kim Rigdon for the record, members of the commission. Back in June, we had been initially talking about PFAS in the region, and some of the board members at the time had said, look, we don't know anything about PFAS. Please bring us some presentations on what is PFAS, what does it mean to the community, why are we talking about it? And so I got together with a couple of the regional partners, Washoe County, Sparks, and Reno, and we all got together to hire not only a professional firm to come and give those presentations, but to also retain them as a technical advisor, technical assistance provider to the region as we move forward and determine what those next steps might look like in resource planning. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Scott I said she's a doctor, Scott Rico, who is here with us from Jacobs Engineering or Jacobs Consulting Firm. And I'll go ahead and hand the floor over to you to.
I have one thing I need to add to first. Teach us how to say this word. Polyfluoroalkyl. Did I say it close?
Per and polyfluoral alkyl substances.
I'm gonna let you say it.
Yeah. that may be the first and last time we need to say that. So, thank you for having me. Just a little bit of background. I've been in the consulting field for a little over 30 years, primarily focused on environmental investigation, remediation, and drinking water treatment. I've been pretty much focused on emerging contaminants my whole career. You know, we used to consider volatile organics emerging contaminants, and then mercury emerging contaminants, and arsenic. And this is the latest, obviously, emerging contaminant. And I've been focused specifically on PFAS for the last 8 or 10 years. So today, I think primarily want to have this overall as a PFAS 101, but specifically we'll talk a little bit more about what PFAS are and talk about where we see them in the North Valleys, the sample collection that was taken, give a little update on the regulatory side, and discuss what we see as potential next steps in terms of the consultancy and activities and areas where we can help the board in the region in terms of PFAS. So for PFAS 101, yes, they are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. So that is the definition. One of the things to keep in mind is that, you know, these are man-made compounds that were actually invented back in the 30s, and they've been used since the 40s and 50s very extensively across our society. One thing to bring up is that, you know, there's always a focus in including up in the North Valleys in terms of the use as a firefighting foam, or what we call AFFF. But it's very important to point out that, you know, it's a set of chemicals that are very prevalent in terms of our use in society. So they're in paints and coatings and stains. They're applied as what was used to be called stain master on carpets, you know, for stain resistance. Any water repellency, Gore-Tex type materials that you have from a clothing standpoint, food packaging. They're even in cosmetics and in electronics. The reason that your fingerprints don't stick on your iPhone is because there's a PFAS coating on your iPhone. So it's, you know, all the properties that make these very useful also make them persistent in the environment. And I bring that up not only because, you know, it's not just an environmental problem, it's a societal problem because we use them everywhere. But that also means that they're found in the blood of pretty much every person on the planet, found in animals and fish worldwide. So that also, you know, complicates things when we're looking at, you know, effects of health, because we've had them in our society, in our bloodstream for years, decades. So what are the concerns with PFAS? Well, on the chemical side, when we look at managing it, especially, you know, in drinking water, for example, it's not a single chemical like arsenic. You know, it's a family of chemicals and compounds that all have different properties regarding the health impacts and as well as regarding the treatment efficiency. As I mentioned, it's used everywhere, so with many beneficial uses, but you know, they're going to be very difficult from a global standpoint. They're just going to be very difficult to remove from our production cycle. And they're designed to be recalcitrant persistent. They're very, very stable chemicals, and that's what creates some of the, you know, the environmental problem. We can't easily get rid of them or treat them. On the environmental regulatory side, there are evidence of health concerns at environmental levels. That's what's really, you know, driving the drinking water regulations that the EPA is talking about. Primarily, it's non-cancer type effects, increased cholesterol, immunosuppression, thyroid impacts. A few PFAS, specifically PFOA and potentially PFOS, the ones we hear about the most, do have potential to be carcinogens. It has not been definitively defined, but there's evidence there, and it's very specific cancers listed there: the testicular cancer and kidney cancer. How we are exposed to PFAS and the pathways for exposure are primarily through ingestion and inhalation. So ingestion, could be drinking water, could be on your food from food packaging. In the inhalation piece, when the EPA actually establishes their calculations for the drinking water, they assume that 80% of your body burden is not from the drinking water. So it's being ingested or inhaled other ways, through food, through indoor environments. Obviously, the paint has some PFAS in it. Our carpet fibers that have the stain master. So a lot of what our exposure is actually indoor environments and consumer type product exposure. And then the last thing is just the rapidly evolving science. We're learning more and more about PFAS every day, both from a treatment standpoint as well as from a health standpoint. And the regulations, if you've been paying attention to what's happening over the last couple of years, they're changing almost on a monthly basis. So why would PFAS be in our drinking water? And this isn't necessarily specific to this region, more from a national perspective, although some do apply. When we look back historically being 5-6 years ago, this really came about because of the DoD in realizing the contamination that resulted from the use of the AFFF. So where there's fire training areas or military sites, that is a potential source to the ground and can impact our drinking water supplies. Industrial releases, direct industrial releases from use. So one of the first PFAS projects I worked on almost a decade ago was from a chemical company, a plastic company that had a storage tank, and they released their PFOA to the groundwater and contaminated the groundwater supply. And then we also look at the impacts. There's growing concern of PFAS that end up in our biosolids or beneficial reuse solids. Beneficial reuse solids being like paper mill solids that do contain PFAS, and those when placed in the environment have the potential to impact our drinking water supplies. Why are they in wastewater? Well, first, just to make sure everybody is calibrated on the same page, our water reclamation facilities receive PFAS. They don't produce PFAS. There's nothing in a plant that uses PFAS. And so the PFAS that comes out of a wastewater reclamation facility is what they've received. It generally passes through. We have industries that use PFAS, and they have industrial discharge permits that go to wastewater reclamation facilities. Landfill leachate is often sent to water reclamation facilities. The amount of products that we've put into landfills that have PFAS in it result in PFAS coming out in the leachate. But also we see strong evidence from the samples that we've collected and others have collected when we look at what we call water reclamation facilities that are impacted by industry or landfill leachate. We see a base load of PFAS because we use it every day in our household. Could be from skincare products or makeup or washing our clothes. So and with our body burden, we do excrete some PFAS as well every time we use the bathroom. So we do see a load into the sewer catchment just from our domestic use. This is a bit of a technical slide in terms of all the unit operations, but just to show that this is generally what we use across our water plants or our wastewater treatment plants, for conventional treatment. Only the operations that are listed in blue there, the membranes, the reverse osmosis membranes, and absorption processes like granular activated carbon or ion exchange are really effective for PFAS. Nothing's new. All three of those unit operations are things we use every day and have used in water treatment plants and wastewater plants. The application to remove PFAS is what's new. So what do we know about PFAS in our area? There were a number of samples collected up in the North Valleys area. I just wanted to go through it and highlight the different samples. And we did an initial review of the data and kind of the highlights of what we saw. So first is the American Flats site. There were soil and crop samples taken from those areas. We being Jacobs, actually conducted an initial risk analysis using those measured concentrations and using through our ecological risk assessment group and our human health risk assessment group, there are available models to look at translation from PFAS into the crops, into on one side grazing horses, on the eco side, and looked at the potential for risk, health risk to those horses, and we did not identify any risk to those grazing horses, given the sample concentrations that we saw. Similarly, on the health side, from a consumer standpoint, the translation from the soil to the crop to cattle or dairy or meat cattle is a potential pathway. Looking at that model, given the concentrations, we did not identify risk for a human to be consuming meat or milk from the dairy cattle or the grazing cattle that would result. There were 2 monitoring wells locations. One of them actually had a soil sample. You can see them highlighted there. Location number 10 is right at the corner of the airport. The other sample, number 12, is adjacent to an industrialized area. Those were elevated in PFAS, and we're really unsure at this point, because we haven't really gone to the next level of evaluation, what the sources of PFAS are, but they are proximate to what we would consider suspect areas of being PFAS sources, the airport and industrial areas. The fire training area, known as USGS Fire, groundwater and soil samples were collected there. There were elevated PFAS, what we would consider typical of the use of firefighting foam, which is kind of master of the obvious. It's a fire training area. What we don't know, because of the limited samples collected in that specific location, is at this point we don't know the extent of the PFAS distribution away from that area, and if there's if there's a direction of more migration in one location or the other. The terminal lakes, I'm looking at this kind of as a system. Silver Lake, the culvert that connects through over to Swan Lake. These are all surface water samples that were collected. What we did see in a general pattern is that the concentrations of PFAS in Silver Lake are lower than what was seen in the connecting culvert and in Swan Lake. We know that the culvert is adjacent to industrialized areas, so that could be a likely source of PFAS. Things to point out when we think about, okay, what do these concentrations mean in the surface water? These aren't recreational water bodies. There's no fishable, they're not fishable surface waters. So one of the things that becomes difficult is that for types of waters like this, what type of guidance is out there for PFAS concentrations? And what I'd say is that there's no national guidance for non-fishable, non-recreational waters. There's limited guidance. The state of Wisconsin, for example, does have surface water standards, but it's really focused on fish consumption. Or if somebody's, if it's a recreational water, if somebody's swimming in there could be incidental ingestion. Not to say that, there should be no swimming signs in there. It's just to say that we recognize that if it's a recreational water body, there could be more exposure than a water body that isn't used for recreational or fishing purposes. Samples were collected around the water reclamation facility, Grisworth. So samples were collected from the effluent itself, and then a location upstream and downstream in the receiving water. What we saw is the upstream samples were actually higher in PFAS than what we saw in the discharge. So suggesting that there may be a source, to the culvert, from an industrialized area. It could be stormwater, it could be an interaction between surface water and groundwater, but it's also supporting that Risworth itself is not necessarily contributing large amounts of PFAS to that surface water connection. Worth, that the values were similar in most cases to Risworth. The values in general were typical of what we'd see from domestic usage. As I talked about before, we do see a difference between elevated and non-elevated PFAS concentrations in wastewater treatment plants, that they do have industrial impacts. These were more typical of what I'd say non-industrialized impacted wastewater treatment plants. The receiving pond actually had a similar discharge. I looked at the data again last night, actually. And what I'd say is the receiving pond that it goes into, which is in between Swan Lake and the wastewater treatment plant, is actually more similar to Swan Lake. So there's probably a lot of hydraulic connection in between Swan Lake and the receiving pond. The wastewater treatment plant, again, was actually lower than the receiving pond. Regulatory updates, a lot on this slide. Just wanted to hit the big points that EPA is doing. On the drinking water side, to even roll back from what we're expecting from the maximum contaminant levels, EPA actually issues what's called the contaminant candidate list. So that's the list of upcoming emerging contaminants that they want to take a look at in the future. And so that most recent list was finalized this past October, almost a year ago. It's used to guide the next unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. The takeaway is that there's more PFAS listed on that CCL list. So, the focus on PFAS from EPA obviously is not going to go away. UCMR 5, so we're under that right now. TAMWA is actually collecting samples of their finished water supplies under UCMR 5 program. What I can say, reviewing the data that's been submitted to EPA so far, is that we did not see any detections above the proposed MCL values in any of the source water or any of the finished water supplies from TAMWA in what's currently being used and supplied to the public. And then the maximum contaminant levels are anticipated by early 2024. I keep hearing that they're actually trying to issue those by the end of December this year. We'll see what happens. I do know that in order for it to not be rescinded by a change in administration, that has to be finalized by March. So that's, I think, really their deadline. I've also seen no indication to changes compared to what's out there in the draft right now. Not to say that there won't be any changes, but we've had no indication that they're not still moving forward with the values that have been proposed. On the environmental side, the EPA actually did issue draft aquatic life criteria, and I only bring this up because obviously that could be a potential issue for surface water bodies. I do want to point out that the draft criteria that they've issued, we deal with the concentrations that we measure and talk about with PFAS in nanograms per liter or parts per trillion. The aquatic life criteria are actually in parts per billion or parts per million. So what that means is that they're 1,000 to a million times greater. The criteria is about 1,000 to a million times greater than what we're measuring in the environment. So I don't see that as a big driver, but they are out there. There's also draft CERCLA rules for PFOA and PFOS, and potentially some more PFAS to be listed as CERCLA hazardous substances. The biggest issue around that is that we're also seeing a bill that's going to potentially be passed to exempt water treatment plants and water reclamation facilities from CERCLA liability. So the managing of residuals and discharges would be exempt from CERCLA under that bill. And then lastly, EPA is definitely continuing to move out of just the drinking water and looking at wastewater and biosolids. We do expect NIPD's rules to come at some point, unsure of the regulatory timing. They have issued memos to the states to identify, to work with the water reclamation facilities to identify point sources through industrial pretreatment programs and conduct pollutant minimization plans. But in terms of an actual directive or numerical limit for under NIPD's, we're unsure of that timing. And then there's also biosolids management risk analysis that EPA is underway right now and should be released next year. So real briefly, next steps, we've done an initial cursory review of the data that I showed there. We haven't really dove into very detailed analysis of that data. We need to do that a little bit further. Once we do that, we can identify if there's potential data gaps for more samples. When we do that, we could prepare a sampling plan. And we certainly are in a position, once we understand a little bit more of what we have in terms of data and the environment surrounding the data, we'd be glad to support with communications plan development, either that communications to the boards, communications to the public, and certainly looking further term to really, the bottom line is to come up with an action plan. So with that, that concludes the early morning discussion on PFAS.
Well, let's go and open up. I'm sure we have some questions.
Yes.
I had some questions.
Mr. Chair.
I'll go last. And Ms. Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank both Kim for taking action on this and our speaker. He did an excellent job. I had asked for this, I think, 2 meetings ago because this was becoming an emergent topic in our community. And I felt like we all needed to get on the same page with the terminology and understanding and respond appropriately, not freak out, but also take this very seriously. I got a chance to hear Mr. Greco's presentation on Monday night. He came up and presented to the North Valley Water Subcommittee that we have at Reno, where we try to communicate and educate our residents about emerging water topics, whether it's a Swan Lake or, what's going on with our sewer treatment plants or this. And so it was, I would say even all the experts, our water experts, were pretty much glued to the presentation because this is really the first time we're having a public discussion. There may have been discussions at the staff level, but having a public discussion, I think, is an excellent way to start beginning to be able to get our arms around this topic. One of the things that I asked at that meeting on Monday was I asked Mr. Greco, what is an emerging standard nationally for PFAS? And I wanted to ask him that again because I think it should be, we should all know what that is. And so if you could answer, that would be great.
So the emerging standard for drinking water, which is really the focus for any standards, is there's two numerical standards, or a numerical standard for PFOA and PFOS, which is being proposed at 4 nanograms per liter for each of those. And then there's 4 different PFAS compounds, GenX, which you may have heard the name, PFHXS, PFBS, and PFNA, for 4 additional PFAS compounds. Those are being grouped together with what the EPA considers a hazard index. So you add them up, and they have to be under a numerical threshold for this.
So it's a cumulative. You add all of them together to get a number.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And then okay, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, when you looked at the data that we have so far, I know you haven't done any new sampling, but we have some existing sampling. Have you seen numbers greater than this 4 nanograms per liter, first of all, in any drinking water samples that either you've seen or that Tom was collected?
The drinking water samples that are posted to the EPA website through UCMR 5. I did not see any drinking water samples for current supplies to the distribution system that exceed those numbers.
Okay, that's great news. And then what about, you said in the environment, it could be, I think you said 1,000 to 1,000,000 times that number. You put it in parts per billion and parts per million instead of nanograms. Have you seen large numbers out in the environment? Like you just looked at 20 samples that you just went over with us?
Right. Yeah, let me give you a quick summary. So on the soil side, of course, that you're comparing a bit of apples and oranges because we don't have soil criteria necessarily. But outside of that fire training area, any individual PFAS that I saw was less than 2 parts per billion,
Okay.
which we would consider a pretty low soils number, quite frankly. In terms of comparing it to, again, industrial or fire training impacts. Within that fire training area, they're up to 50 parts per billion. So that it is a significant increase. On the water side, groundwater, let me start with the groundwater. Groundwater outside of that fire training area, we saw individual PFAS concentrations from non-detect to up to almost 300 nanograms per liter. The highest that it was at that monitoring well 120, which was right at the corner of the airport.
And
Groundwater,
so,
go ahead, sorry.
no, you go ahead.
Groundwater inside the fire training area, significantly higher concentrations, like 140 to 5,400 nanograms per liter. So very much what we consider a source zone.
Okay. Now, can you at some point, I know Kim is looking at hiring you to do some further sampling and do some analysis on what this all means for us. And maybe Kim could speak to that, but I'm wondering, is there a way to put what you just said on a map, the known data that we have? Would that be useful? Even a water map, a soil map?
Yep,
separate.
we can definitely do that.
And then if you could, I mean, with the appropriate caveats that, for drinking water, it's this, but for out in the environment, these numbers don't raise alarm, or they do raise alarm in the area of the firefighting area. So it would just be good because it would help us in the interim to tamp down or just, have a fact-based conversation. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm looking for.
Yep, absolutely. I guess two things. One is just to comment on the surface water samples, related to those ambient water quality criteria. We saw non-detect up to about 1,500 nanograms per liter across the lakes and the creek, or the connecting creek, I guess. The creek upstream of Risworth was actually the higher area, and Swan Lake was lower. But again, you're talking 1,500 nanograms per liter potential criteria for ambient water quality, and 1,000 to 1,000,000 times higher than that. The other comment I would make is that the criteria are there are no EPA issued environmental cleanup criteria for PFAS. That may come someday. That's actually one of the reasons why the DoD really hasn't cleaned up anything on their sites either, because there are no criteria. So the important thing to look at when we start looking at the samples we have and the samples to collect is there has to be a migration pathway and a transport pathway to an exposure. So that's the big thing to take a look at is, in the environmental samples that we have, do they have a potential for an exposure pathway, either through drinking water or through, other means of contact.
And then, Mr. Chair, I know I've asked a lot of questions, but the final one, and if you want to go around the room, but eventually I'd like to get an answer to a question, just what is Kim's proposal for going forward in these next steps? Is it an agreement? Is it a regional agreement? Is it just at Western Regional Water Commission? What she's thinking, but that's just where.
Yeah, thank you, Chairwoman. So Kim Riggin for the record. What we're doing right now is this contract was approved at the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission because the program manager, with their direction, has the authority to enter into a contract up to $25,000. So this contract is already set. what we're using the initial contract funds for is for these presentations and to get the regional partners to work with our technical consultants and figure out what those next steps are. Once we do that, we'll put together a scope of work that will support the region as a whole and bring that to the commission and then amend this contract with that amount. Ask for that budget request.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for this excellent presentation.
Thank you. And do we have anybody else who would like to ask or share something?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, real quick, let the record show that Claire did have to go. Adriella did leave. So, Ms. Hill, go for it.
thank you. I just, I also appreciate the presentation and, more information we have about this, the better. I just think if we're going to disseminate any information to the public, and the map, I think that Councilwoman Dewar has asked for does make sense and is a good idea. I just think it's important that we point out that this is everywhere. PFAS is everywhere across the country. This is not only unique to the Truckee Meadows. So that's the only thing that I think is really important, and it is so emergent. I just don't want there to be an over exaggeration about what to do next and how to proceed, just as long as we're saying that we're trying to be, as communicative as we can, but also understanding that this is a national, worldwide issue.
I think that's kind of almost, I want to reiterate, and I think both points are very important. I think the balance comes, and I'm going to add one more to it. Not only do we want information of what you guys are doing, but we want a voice in how the practical is of how, and I really want to make sure we're doing this, because if we're not careful, we're just waiting for somebody who on that level to throw at us what we have to do, and then we have to respond budgetarily to something that could be out of control. And not that they don't pay attention to what we do, but we know how federal government works and they don't sometimes. And so even state does it many times. And so I want to make sure that we're actively listening, but also how to respond, because it isn't something that's going away. It's not like we can just go turn off that faucet and then we're done. If we could do that, then I think obviously we'd all be turning off the faucet and we'd say that's bad. But this is something that's throughout our world. It's something that we are going to have to deal with. But I want to make sure that our voice is really at the table. So if as we go forward, I know that's not your job necessarily, but it's part of this conversation of making sure that whether that's a committee put together, something that we bring to the state level, something as legislators meet, that we're very involved, because if not, we'll be left with who knows what comes up with, that it's just not manageable. We couldn't even follow through if we wanted. And so I think both balance and obviously it's something educating everybody so they understand what we're doing might change some behaviors where in the future we get better and better and see some of this way. But it is an interesting thing. So anybody else? Very good. Are we looking? We're not looking for anything today. It's just a presentation. Because you already got your. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the beginning of the great conversation. So I would say it's the beginning of a conversation, because I think we have a lot more to conversate as we go. So thank you. Appreciate it. We're moving on to our program manager updates. Ms. Kim Riggin.
Thank you, Member Dare and members of the committee. This will be short. I just wanted to briefly, I know that Member Dewar had already brought up the fact that the North Valley's Water Management Subcommittee meeting was on Monday, and they heard from Mr. Grieco that night on PFAS too. So the informational presentation was very well received, and I think it was great information for people who have a little bit of an understanding of the PFAS issues, but they really don't know where it comes from and how ubiquitous it is in the environment. So I think it was really well received by the residents out there as well.
Good.
There were other water presentations. There was a presentation on the flood mitigation efforts. Director Smith of Washoe County gave that presentation, and he addressed the Swan Lake flood protection measures, Silver Lake flood action plan, and Swan Lake dewatering and irrigation pipeline updates. So I just wanted to let you know that those updates were provided at that meeting, and we'll hear more from Dwayne on the other Cold Springs projects, but they are communicating with the members of the public out there. So that was great. We did hold our Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission priority setting meeting on October 4th. We didn't have time to bring that to this meeting. I'd like to, with the board approval to bring that to the current meeting on November 1st, I believe. And we'll bring the results of that. We'll do some project updates and create some discussion among the two boards, so that you get the information you know on the various projects. And we also, I don't know if you've noticed, we did kind of a soft launch of our WRWC logo update, and we're pretty proud of that. It's on the agenda if you look at the top. And we've been working with Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency staff to do that. We have that shared work program with them. They've been super helpful, and they've also offered to assist us with a website overhaul. So we'll be working with them under that contract to do a website overhaul and get a more user-friendly website that's more modern for our public.
You see the surfer on that way, we good.
What's that?
You need a surfer.
We were toying with different ideas, and we wanted to keep it more corporate looking rather than, we were going in the cartoon direction. We're like, no, we'll keep it a little more corporate looking. So we're working towards that. I just wanted to let you know that we'll be working on that through November and December, and hopefully have something to show you in January, February timeframe. So we're looking forward to that. We also, on the Advanced Purified Water site visits, and you probably got the email on that, we're looking to take the Northern Nevada Public Health folks. We're going to see how many people we get interested in the beginning of January to one of the Northern California sites. And once we find out what our who's going to attend, our list of attendees, we'll see how many seats we have available and then extend that out. But we wanted to get the public health department an opportunity to get out there and see some of those sites. And then we will be, I sent out another poll for this group and the Water Planning Commission group, and we'll do some site visits in March and April for those two groups. And then we'll extend that out to possibly some NDEP folks, other agencies in the region.
I'd say if you are a part of a board that you think that this is a conversation they should be aware of, I think information is huge education. I'm not saying everybody has to agree with every piece of it, but they need to understand it. And as we move forward, then we can all have an educated conversation as we walk forward. But not knowing about it, I think in the world we're in right now, I don't think it's acceptable at this point. I think we really need to make sure we're open to that and push our colleagues and those staff who need to be there. Thanks.
And that's all I have.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Kim Rigdon on her update? I hear none. Okay, we're moving on to our discussion of possible direction to staff regarding agenda items and dates for the future. Ms. Chair, do you want to speak to that? You have anything?
I think I'm leaning towards Kim to guide us on this.
Okay.
Okay, so what I have on the, Kim Rigdon for the record, what I have on the agenda for the November 1st meeting is the Cold Spring, we're going to bring back the Cold Springs water balance scope of work and presentation and discussion on the rapid infiltration basin analysis report. Director Smith said that he'll be able to make that meeting. And the results of the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission Priority Setting Workshop, we'll bring that. I also wanted to ask, I know that the city of Reno has a joint, do you guys have a council meeting that day?
Yeah, there's some problem I wanted to talk to you about on that.
And I thought it ran until 2:30. And so normally those Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission meetings start at 1:30, but we can move them to 2:30 to accommodate the
What
other
day
meeting.
what day are we thinking this is gonna be?
Wednesday, November 1st.
Oh, yeah, and so, yeah, because the mayor, I think, called a special meeting that day.
Yes.
10
It's on
a.m.
affordable housing.
Yeah,
It
It's
starts
also-
at 10.
it's also the joint coordinating committee, so that's a conflict. But I had it on, well, maybe it's an old calendar, November 15th, are we also meeting?
That's the normal WRWC meeting. This is the annual joint meeting that we
Oh, okay.
have with the Northern Nevada Water.
Because that day also conflicts with the Reno City Council meeting.
And if I was not going to propose we have a meeting on the 15th.
Oh, okay,
Because we'll have the joint
good.
meeting on the 1st.
Okay, just the first, yeah.
And
Well-
Kim, who is the joint meeting with? Who are you expecting to participate?
The Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission
And this body?
and this body.
Okay, so we could, myself and Ms. Breckus, maybe, late. Perhaps we should push it back 3 to 5. I don't know.
Let it said that I'll be doing my own research of Hawaiian water on that day, and so you won't hear from me, of course, see my face.
So as it is, you have at 9 a.m. over at Sparks?
No, for the November 1st meeting.
Oh, I know you're part of, yeah.
Yeah, typically they're at 1:30.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's not populated on my calendar yet, okay.
It's on my calendar for 2 to 4.
2 to 4.
Yeah, I don't have it on, but, you know, if that's the day, that's okay. I'm really trying to make the morning meeting of the joint coordinating committee, so.
But Kim, will you will you coordinate with our staff in Reno and look at potentially moving this back to 3?
We'll do that.
Okay, and then where were you planning to hold it?
This will be at the Washoe County Complex in the caucus room,
Caucus room, okay.
upstairs from the chambers.
Thank you. You might want to make sure you have a quorum.
I will do
I
that.
was gonna say, I only say that, maybe I'm the only one, but you might want to make sure that.
That's pretty small room for.
I was thinking, you
It
may want to
is.
look at the room in Reno in the 7th floor conference room, which is bigger, and then myself and Miss Breakfast could maybe just walk right up there and get there and not have that time lost in driving.
Let me look into that.
And if that does not work, we do have a downstairs meeting thing in the city parks. It's kind of a little bit bigger than the chambers. Kind of sit around like this. So it could be usable. I don't know if it's open or not, but let us know. I know that wouldn't be, you'd have to drive, but I think your first choice is probably smart to be in Reno. Okay, we're moving on to public comments. Any public comments? Going. Okay. Commission comments. Anything anybody want to share? Say hi. All that good stuff. Awesome. And any staff comments?
No staff.
Okay. Well, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.